Hi there. In this lecture we see Roman Toran Albero against Mikhail Tal in 1961 European Team Championship. We see c4, the English opening. Tal replies e5, knight c3, d6, g3, and Tal plays a very committal move early on, f5. Pawns do not go backwards, and Tal is no exception to this rule. His pawns do not go backwards. After d4, yeah, black is challenged here. Perhaps the most solid move is bishop e7, accepting the possibility of a queen trade. And if knight f3, e4, this position should be about even. The way Tal plays it is a little bit controversial, this e4 move. It does give up the f4 square, and white has some very, very good options. The best might actually be knight h3. For example, knight f6, bishop g2, bishop e7, and now undermining the black center. c6, f takes. This situation is going to be very pleasant indeed for white, especially after knight f4, looking at e6. If knight g4, that's like one of the better moves. Let's just rule out knight b6. All white does is just take and then take on e4, big advantage. But let's go crazy here and look at knight g4. Knight e6, this situation is very dynamic, but ultimately white can actually sack the queen here in return and get a big advantage even here. The expression here, I would say, is it's kind of a hypermodern destruction of black's occupation here. But white actually went for f3 instead, which doesn't seem as good as knight h3. So f3 though was played. Knight f6, bishop g2, e takes f3, knight takes f3, g6, white castles, bishop g7, e4. Here bishop g5 is a nice option still though, and if black castles, e4, this situation is very pleasant for white. For example, like this, with bishop takes e4, it seems as though, you know, white's got good pieces and prospects. However, okay, e4 was played though, not bishop g5. And we see f takes e4, knight g5, Tal castles, knight g takes e4, which is actually an inaccuracy, it seems. The other knight, after knight takes, okay, here, it seems instead of knight takes e4, or rather knight g takes e4, knight c takes e4 might have been a little bit better to keep the aggressive knight on g5. So okay, we have knight g takes e4, knight takes e4, rook takes f8. Now the queen is put into a very interesting situation here. After queen takes f8, knight takes e4, but now knight c6 looking at d4, so white logically protects that, but bishop f5 now. We see queen d2, and now it looks as though, hang on, hold on, what is going on here after rook e8? This is getting to be a bit strange, this situation. Both sides have kind of diagonals of death, white's diagonal of death and black's diagonal of death, and there's a kind of transaction here, very interesting, about to happen. So knight g5 is played. If queen d3, black simply plays for 50 points. What would you play here? There's a nasty pin. We just put more pressure on it. Queen e7. If rook f1, then again queen e7. But actually white does have a resource here against this pressure. Can you see what that is for 50 defensive points? Okay. It's actually rook e1 is possible, because queen d7 might be the best move, because here if bishop takes e4, takes, there's bishop f2 skewing the queen to the rook, and this is better for white. So yeah, it's interesting stuff. So technically if queen d7, this should be about equal. So there was a move in rook f1, it seems, here as well. yeah, pinning there, and even if queen e7, rook e1, it's subtle stuff. But White went with knight g5, and this seems to ask for a tactic, a punishing tactic, but it's not entirely clear, as it turns out. So what is the punishing tactic, you think, that Tal played here? But he's got to factor in the punishments of the punishments to do another punishment. Yes, it's multiple levels of recursion. Punishments of a punishment of a punishment. I hope you don't get a Stack Overflow processing that. But here, yes, what does black play to punish white's diagonal of death? This diagonal. So for 50 points, rook takes e3, and at first it seems, hold on, this is a bit of a problem. It is a problem, especially if queen takes e3, bishop takes d4, because then the bishop also clearance of g7. So here we can actually use g7, thanks very much, and we've just won the queen for not much. But white throws in, while the bishop's on g7, white throws in bishop d5 check. And is there a snag now? Because hasn't white got knight f7 check with perpetual check? Well, Tal's not interested in the draw though. If he does play king g8, then sure, knight g5 and it's perpetual. But Tal's not interested in the draw, so he has to play the only move here to make the game carry on, which is queen takes f7. I'm not going to test you on it, it's the only move. Queen takes f7. So bishop takes f7, but it's interesting here how Tal plays. So currently, the imbalance is quite interesting. It's actually 6 pawns each, and it's 2 pieces for the queen, basically, isn't it? If we take out the bishops from the equation and take out the rooks, it's like 2 pieces for a queen. So why is this worth it? Well, Tal plays a move to get an important pawn now, rook d3. So centre pawn is dropping as well. So 2 pieces and the centre pawn and its check. But also the bishop's kind of not very relevant to these light square weaknesses. So we see king g2, and now the bishop's also being used as a tempo gainer, knight e5. So things are not that easy. We see rook d1. If bishop e8, in fact the black pieces are conspiring here after bishop g4. If queen e4, rook d2 check, king f1, knight f3 is crushing. It's actually threatening. Bishop h3 mating. That would be absolutely crushing. So rook d1 was played. Instead, we have rook e3. If rook takes d1, then just queen takes d1, hits the bishop. And if check, king f1, and if check, king e1. And here, yeah, this is after bishop c5, say bishop e6. White's actually better here with precise play. So, okay, rook e3 was played. Now here, white makes things a whole load worse than they probably needed to be. White plays queen f1. If queen d2, then there does seem to be a theoretical possibility of white drawing here after check. Knight f3 hits the queen. There's queen f2. Rook d3 hits the queen. Queen e2, and if rook takes d1, queen takes d1, knight g5 check. The king looks as though it's been hunted down though, but white can give back the queen and reach this situation that even though white is 2 pawns down after this c6, this position isn't so clear. It's a kind of fortress, and you can tell fortresses quite often. There's fortress potential, at least, in my view, because the evaluation doesn't change. It's like a plus score which doesn't ever go up after that. You can see that white has a bind on the light squares. It's an opposite kind of bishop situation, which sometimes offer these kind of big drawing opportunities. And here, yeah, it is tricky. The bishop can blockade on the light squares. So yeah, there might have been a chance to draw, in theory, with best play. But queen f1 makes things much worse for white now. And here we have a case where the highly centralized pieces, they're literally kind of standing on many of the key centre squares after bishop e4. Actually, it's very aesthetically pleasing if we think about the golden centre squares. There's one on the kind of extended centre if you extend the centre. So, a little bit. So yes, it's highly centralised pieces, combined with light square weaknesses, combined with a bishop which is not helping the king. And we have now a situation after king h3, where Tal plays rook f3. And this looks very bad, because further material seems inevitable, or getting mated, one or the other. We see queen e2. If queen g2, then there's no reverse gear for the king. This doesn't seem fundamentally a brilliant idea, not giving the king g2. So bishop f5, knight takes f7, and even though the bishop drops here, g5, king h5, bishop g6 check, king g4, there's knight e5 check, king h3, bishop f5 check, and the king is getting mated in a beautiful manner. So yeah, queen g2, safety point, doesn't quite work. So queen e2, but now after bishop f5 check, white did resign here. So why is this? If king h4, because if king g2, there's actually, let's have a look at king g2, there's actually rook f2 check. And this situation is a bit more clear cut. The knight and bishop are better than the rook in this endgame position. And black is a pawn up. That should be enough to win. So if king h4 though, then rook f2. This is a pain. If queen e1, then there's a weakness of the last move. f3 is neglected. Knight f3 is actually a checkmate. So yeah, with a little bit of help from the opponents, some inaccuracies, it turned out to be a super interesting game. The clash of the two diagonals of death. So a super interesting tactical game. Tal going in just two pieces and a pawn basically for the queen, but highly centralized pieces. But another factor is that the bishop kind of wasn't that relevant to the light square weaknesses. So the light square weaknesses, you could say, were amplified by the bishop's location, and also the bishop itself, a source of tempo gain. A brilliant game from the magician from Riga. I hope you enjoyed it as much as me. And the final position, just for the record, yeah, let's go back to the final position, bishop f5 check. Okay, thanks very much. Hi there. Thanks for getting to the end of the YouTube video. If you would like to see other Mikhail Tal games, I actually have an amazing course for Mikhail Tal, which is currently at 4.9 with over 400 students. You can check this out from the Kingscrusher TV page. So Chess Strategy and Tactics, Mikhail Tal's amazing games. You can check out some free preview videos as well here. If you do expand all sections, you can see the preview links to get some free previews. So I hope you do check out this course index and the free previews. So I really had a thrilling time actually checking out Mikhail Tal's games. So yeah, the YouTube video here you saw was just a sample from this course. I hope you check it out. Okay, thanks so much. Oh, by the way, comments, questions, likes, shares, all appreciated. And if you did get to this part of the video, please do leave some sort of comment like Tal fan. Okay, thanks again.